Man, it's good to be back. It's good to be back live. I've got a special guest today, but before I bring him on, I'm going to tell y'all a brief story. It's kind of cool to see people on their path, right? So from the beginning, not so much the beginning. I think I met him towards the middle. But we met in our master's program at Texas Southern University at the clinical psychology program there, the master's program there. And it's really cool to see how we can have this conversation of, man, this is what I want to do. I'm gonna go on and get my PhD. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I really want to work with the geriatric population. And then seeing this man go on and do the work, what he said, what he claimed, what he wanted to do, like the ambition, like put it out there in the atmosphere, and now he's making it happen. And so it's a beautiful thing. I remember in grad school, when I first, ran into this guy, we had shared, our story, and I told him about basically my testimony. And during grad school, I had trouble getting into practicums. I had trouble getting into internships. And the main reason for this was because I was a convicted felon. And so because I had these violent felonies on my record, I struggled to get into the practicums with the kids. A lot of these agencies had contracts with the Department of Family and Protective Services here in Texas, which is CPS, Child Protective Services. And so they didn't want to jeopardize those contracts to bring on this convicted felon to work with them, the student to work with their clients. And so I remember telling Gerard about this and telling him about my journey. And, he just reminded me of how much sweeter it's going to be after I become fully licensed and we start practicing. And so, Gerard's here, and Dr. Duncan, I'm going to start changing it. I'm going to change it. I'm going to get in the habit of calling him Dr. Duncan. So Dr. Duncan is going to be with us right after this brief commercial break.
Jumping out the whip, shit cold. Watching my step-gram froze. Most my day spent alone. Same with my bro, he knows. Gotta pay dues. Walking in mud, you can check my shoes. Tryna bite this, might chip your tooth. Tryna come with you, fake no room.
Dr. Duncan, I almost did it again. Dr. Duncan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really good. So I recently got back on Facebook, and like a week ago. And when I got back on Facebook, I was reminded, man, Gerard, man, I need to catch up with him. And so I saw you and I said, you know what? Instead of us getting on a phone call, or instead of us, jumping on, a video conference face to face, I said, there's so much value that we can add to my community, which I have on Facebook, Your Guide to Immigration Evaluations. I teach other clinicians how to do immigration evaluations. But there's so much value that we can also offer to those who are on LinkedIn, young clinicians, young professionals who are going into this field, interested in gaining a master's degree in psychology or possibly a PhD. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on live. So thank you for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me. I feel, right now I am in the trenches with a lot of clinicians that are working towards licensure out here in California. So different lay of the land. This is the land of the LMFT, which is, just by lettering sounds different, and meaning in Texas is totally different. But out here you have so many LMFT, whereas, in Texas we were hunting for that LPC license. That's like the piece where you can capture that and make some good fun. So a little bit different, but same struggles.
So real quick, let's back up. I want you to kind of introduce yourself as who you are professionally, with your license, the alphabet, and things of that nature. Go ahead.
So my name is Dr. Duncan. Just wrapped up a dissertation and everything this past year. My interests are geriatric populations, always been that way, specifically Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases. Now more, I guess, streamlined focus is what happens when severe mental illness meets that neurodegenerative piece. So Alzheimer's and dementia. That's the piece that I'm studying right now. And so, saw a hole there in the literature and, how that's affecting the population out here in California. And I was like, well, I'm around it. I have the ability and the background to, maybe not fill that hole, but maybe close it and figure it out as much as I can. And so that's what I've been doing.
You know, it's interesting because way back when 2016, 2017, 2018, when we were talking about, our future and what we wanted to do in this field of psychology, you had talked about doing geriatric work back then. So give us all some background on how you got into that passion of serving the geriatric community.
So, with a lot of people that get the bachelor's in psychology, they're like, there's no money in it. You got to go and get your master's. You got to get your doctorate. Well, for me, when I got out, I was able to work in a private practice, and we did neuropsychological evaluations. So I was able to do a lot of the assessments, primarily with the geriatric population. I found out I had a great rapport with them. The money was really good, as far as just what you can make on the bachelor's degree. But it was rewarding. I saw where, not only am I able to affect one person, but literally the quality of their life, their family, all of this stuff, because we were connected to research also. So it was just bigger than that one person. It was like something that potentially, if we got this thing sorted out or figured out, it could benefit me or you in my lifetime. So that's how I got there. I wouldn't say that I wanted to end up there, but just how, when I got out, what was available, it was a perfect fit. So was able to work in that private practice, and then that spurred me into working at Baylor College of Medicine, where I did clinical research for a while with the geriatric population. So I worked in the neurology department, ran clinical trials, monitored them, and then I ended up becoming a project manager at McKesson. And so, really kind of going the path of someone having a bachelor's degree and really trying to maximize that degree. My thing when I always was in the field was I want to work in the field. That was something that I know a lot of people, they get their degree and they're like, I got to go do these other jobs. This psychology stuff isn't really making me the money to take care of myself. But that could be, that's something that I could say throughout my career. I've always worked in the field of psychology or just, assessments. So the fork in the road for me was when I hit the ceiling. And that was the part where I'm like, okay, now this is the part where I have to go back and get my master's. And that's where our journey kind of started.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just joining on TikTok, those who just joined on LinkedIn, YouTube, I'm interviewing Dr. Gerard Duncan. We went to grad school together, master's degree at Texas Southern University, the community clinical psychology program there, master's program there. Let me ask you, so a couple of days ago, I had did this, the intro and I started creating the marketing material for this live and shooting out the email. And you had told me that you are PsyD, not PhD. I want you to briefly tell us the difference between the two and why did you choose PsyD if you had any other options? Why this program?
So PsyD, PhD, it's something in the South that I know for sure Baylor had the program when I left Texas, but it's not something really toted. There's the PhD. What I found with that is PsyD is more professional degree. It is taught by people, boots on the ground, like people that are doing therapy. Whereas your PhD in most programs, and I'm going to say this, like, it's not definitive, but most programs, you get your PhD, your goal is to work in academia, not to see clients day in and day out. So when you look at someone that has a PsyD, they have way more hours with interaction with patients, whereas they might not have the background publications of someone that went and pursued a PhD, and vice versa. Now you have some hybrids like myself that was already in the research piece that brought that in and able to merge it with the PsyD. But yeah, those are kind of the two differences. The other piece with the PsyD and PhD with just applying, because it's a professional degree, you're pretty much funding it yourself. There's scholarships, but nothing to say that it's going to sustain you through the whole program. Whereas PhDs, there's a fewer slots, but those slots are pretty much paid for through for your classes and teaching and things like that. So your focus is just on getting publications out, doing research. Whereas PsyD, you're gonna be doing hours, you're gonna be doing practicum hours, and you're going to be trying to take out loans or pay for it yourself. but there's going to be more availability to get into those programs.
So you chose PsyD. Did you have any other options? Why did you choose PsyD and the program that you attended, your doctoral program?
So one, Santa Barbara was on the list. I looked at all the places that I applied to. I looked at where is there going to be a concentration of geriatric population, right? So you think about California, well, this is the place for that, right? Florida, Texas, these are places. Texas, I kind of, I did undergrad, bachelor's there, so I was like, I want to get out. California was the next step. And then I looked at Santa Barbara, the program in Santa Barbara, what really sold me were the faculty there. But then I also looked at, well, it's a large aging population that have funds, right? So not only do they need the services, but they can pay for the services. Like let's not, I know mental health, we don't want to talk about that, but our skills are valuable. The years that you and I have put into it, they mean something, and people will pay for those services, specifically on this end.
I think that's a piece that we need to highlight. I find it interesting that, as mental health professionals and clinicians, it's really frowned upon that we should not have these conversations about money and reimbursement, and how our services should be done out of our goodwill and our heart, and we should just be trying to pay bills and make a living versus living a higher quality of life for the effort, the education and the training that we actually put in. And so I'm glad to hear that you said that about the financial resources that are available for the services that you offer. That's a good piece. Let me ask you, I guess let me go ahead and stick to the script. I want you to walk us through the exam process. So you finished grad school, you went on to get your PhD. Tell us all the requirements that it takes to get up to your licensure.
So that's one of the pieces I saw with the script. Really key for a lot of people that want to pursue the doctorate piece. For me, before I graduated in 2017, I had already applied to the programs. And so while going through finals and going through my last quarter at Texas Southern, I already applied to multiple graduate schools, did the essay. It was probably one of the most stressful times in my life, because I'm balancing working a full-time job, applying to doctoral programs, and wrapping up my master's program. Now you say, well, why would someone want to put themselves through that stress when they're in that space? Why not ride out and enjoy finishing up this master's? Well, if I didn't apply at the time, because I graduated fall 2017, it would have set me back a whole year as far as the application process. I would have graduated, but most of the applications for PhD PsyD programs, they start at the top of the, well, they try to get everything in October, December, depending on the program. But then by January, February, where you're interviewing at. They let you know if you got in or if you're not. And by the summertime, you're starting up probably September, August, October, in that little times period. So if I would have took that time off and not applied and gone through all that stress, it would have literally set me back a year of just waiting, working full time for this thing.
It's funny because as you talk about this, I remember having this discussion in grad school towards the end when we were taking those exams and preparing to graduate. I remember having this conversation with you on how you needed to go ahead and apply because of the application deadlines, when you can start, and you didn't want to be set back. You wanted to go right into the doctoral program. So I remember having this conversation as you talk about it. How many years from the first semester you started the PhD or the PsyD to your completion, how many years after the master's? Because we had a master's. There are programs that will allow you, or most programs will allow those bachelor's level students to go right into the PhD or the PsyD. But we had a master's degree, which put us more competitive to get into those programs, a master's degree in psychology. So how many years did it take after that master's degree?
For me, it was 5. It was 5 years. And I could have gotten it done in 4. The piece that added the additional year for me was and when you're doing your it's called pre-doc hours. So right before you're done or after you're done with your dissertation, you're done with your coursework. In California and most programs, you have to do a period where you set up with the site, you work there for a year. For me, that period, I cut it in half because I was working full time as a professor. So I was able to do that pre-doc and also teach courses and earn a living because again, none of that was paid. That year of working in pre-doc was unpaid. So that's one of the things that the state of California kind of sprung because they recognized there was a deficit in students being able to sign up for these pre-doc hours and not being able to sustain themselves because they're working full-time for free. And unless you come from a background where parents can take care of you or you have that financial funding, it literally is a gatekeeper for you being out of the field. So they adopted the piece where you could go half-time at certain sites and still, build those hours up. So for me, that's what the additional year was. But if that piece wasn't an issue, I would have got through it in 4.
I want you to tell me, what is the girth of your practice? What do you do as a psychologist? Tell us, what is the majority work that you do? What does it entail?
So right now I'm in San Diego, California, and I'm working in a facility, inpatient, outpatient facility. So it's a mixture of everything. I am doing individual therapy with clients with schizophrenia, bipolar, substance abuse, or layered on with each other. I'm also running groups on different units, different acuity units where, they're just coming or dealing with psychosis to some being stabilized on meds. And we're working through psychoeducational groups, process groups. And then in addition to that, I'm also doing neuropsych assessments too on the unit. So some of those clients that maybe they're older and we want to know, are meds working? Where is the psychosis coming from? Is their memory loss caused due to medication? That's another component that we do there. So it's a lot in the setting that I'm in, which is very different from some of my peers. Some of them, they work in a county. All they're doing is working with kids, doing individual therapy. But for me, I do like the challenge. I do like the ability for every day to kind of just be a mystery, for it to be a calm day or to be a day that you're stepping up and you're really learning something. Because for me, the SMI population and seriously mental ill population is a population that's really misunderstood and not understood at all. It is a spectrum. And so for that, I get to deal with 2 clients with bipolar or schizophrenia, but to see one's high functioning out there in the world and the other is, maybe lower functioning and trying to figure out med management and resources. So it's very fulfilling.
Yeah. And I think it's, when I worked in inpatient, I found it fun, more interesting, to find the baseline for patients. And once you get them to their baseline, I feel like that was the real clinical part. And you got the psychiatrists that are doing most of the med management and really handling that, but helping them get to their baseline, I thought that was extremely fun because you get to interview parents, family members, wives, husbands, children, find out when they're functioning at their best and, trying to get them to that level. And I thought that was really fun to watch them transition from extremely psychotic and sometimes just out of control, coming in from the police department, bringing them in sometimes. And so let me ask you for clarity, is it medical or behavioral health hospital psychiatric inpatient that you're talking about, your setting?
It's medical.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so we have it's a interesting space because there's an inpatient and there's an outpatient component tied to it all within the same facility. So it's cool because that person could be, um, they could be seen on the inpatient piece, discharged, and then there's services that help them right there, for group and individual. There's also even a pharmacy there on the campus, so it's like all within one place, which is amazing to see because as when things get fragmented and kind of spread across town with this population, it's easy for meds not to get picked up, or
Oh
I don't know how to take the bus route to see this individual therapist or group. And so that's where, the drop off happens. So it all being contained in a one place really makes it accessible for the clients.
yeah.
The other piece that I really enjoy about being out here too is the diversity. I'm in San Diego, so not only is it a diverse population, but heavy emphasis on the military. So that's in itself is another group that we're servicing and having
Oh,
to
yeah.
deal with different types of issues that you wouldn't necessarily find in other major cities.
Yeah. So I want you to tell me. I'm going to tell you, I love doing testing and assessments. I love doing psychologicals. I love it. But in, for you, what do you get the most joy out of in your practice?
For me, the assessments is a big piece. The other piece that I really love, I love teaching. That being a professor is a big piece. For you and I, we know that is a big piece where we're missing. As African American male clinicians, we make up only 1% of the psychology field. So rare. But to give that perspective, to be able to write recommendations, to be able to have conversations with other minorities coming into the field, what to expect and what my journey has been, it's powerful to pass it on because it was given to me. That was one of the abilities, one of the reasons I was able to, get through my program was because I had some really good mentors and professors.
One of the things that was recommended to me is like, go on, get your PhD. You're going to be, what is it? Just a rare breed, right? A black male psychologist. There's just not many of us out there. And so that was one of the key points that was really put on my shoulders, and in the back of my head, I thought about it. And my situation was a little bit different. I had a young family I needed to, take care of and just be more present. So instead of going across country or, possibly out of state to go to a doctoral program, I chose to start my career in the mental health profession at the master's level. Those of you who are just joining on LinkedIn, those of you who are just joining on TikTok and on YouTube, I am interviewing an old friend, Dr. Gerard Duncan. We met in our master's program at Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas, and he is now practicing as a psychologist out in California. Any suggestions that you have for a very specific young professional? This young professional is thinking about going back to school, and they are thinking about going into a PsyD or a PhD program. What advice do you have for that individual?
Okay, so that's a question that I get often, not framed as specific as you give it, but always ask. The big piece I would say is if you're at that juncture where you're wrapping up your master's, why are you going to get a doctorate? What do you feel that you can access and do with that degree that you can't do with your master's? I have so many of my colleagues that are wrapping up licensure with their doctorate, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go do individual therapy. And in my mind, I'm like, well, why didn't you just stop when you were at your master's? You could have done that. It's not for the small pay bump, which is probably like 10 or 20 bucks more for having those credentials. So really thinking about what, who, why you want to do it. Because if it's for money, it's not going to be, well, it can be there, but it's not going to be there out of the gate.
Mhm.
You really have to have a passion. And so for myself, it was being able to help and access more than that person in front of me. I wanted to help students. I wanted to help more people than just doing individual therapy in and out, or just doing psych assessments. So that was the piece that it really unlocked for me.
Yeah. So as thank you, DK, for the fire emojis. So Ornella, if you can see that, can a PsyD be fully funded, even part-time? So I want to address that question before we move on.
There's certain programs out there that do. It's very rare, so I would definitely talk to the program and see what that is. Get it in writing. Speak to students that have received it. The other piece that a lot of people miss with the PsyD is, typically it's not funded, but there's a lot of scholarships. There's a lot of teaching fellowships and things like that that are available that can supplement the income that you would have to do working. So that is a piece that certain professional programs, especially out here in California, where it's really common, they will have provisions for you to, be able to at least break even, to get through the program. Whereas others, it's just like, okay, you're in, figure out tuition is due at this point, and you see the dropout rate. So really, I would say with the funding component, really talking to the professors, really talking to maybe a first and second year, and ask how they're piecing it together. And you'll be surprised of how many just scholarships and funding that's out there for the PsyD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm glad that I'm glad the question was asked, and I'm glad we got to talk about that, because it sounds like you need to be prepared for the rigorous struggle it's gonna take financially on you. That however long it takes for you to get out of that grad program or that doctoral program. I got another question here. I'm taking my NCMHCE in May so I can get my LPC. I started a PhD program, but I stopped at 27 credits. What recommendations do you have for DK?
Again, asking yourself what's the purpose of the PhD? Why are you going to get it? If it's just to have the letters, that's cool. But I know some amazing LPCs that are practicing out there that can run circles around PhDs that I know. So you really have to be focused on what you're going to use it towards. A lot of people, and so something you brought up earlier, they'll jump from their bachelor's straight into the doctorate program. Those are the ones that I see really struggle because, kind of like what DK has, he has this experience as an LPC. So he has all those hours built up on doing therapy. Whereas in a PhD, you jump from your bachelor's and then you go straight into practicum hours where they're assuming out the gate, you know how to work with your client. Whereas all you might have had under your belt is theory.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to probably offend a lot of people, but it irks me when people go on to get PhDs in like social work or in those type of the social service industry, and they're not becoming psychologists. So they just have a PhD, and so their goal is to price themselves more on a therapy session. So instead of $145, $150, they want to charge $250 or $300 per session. Now in California, that's perfectly fine. It flies. But in most areas, insurance isn't going to reimburse you that much. And finding the private clientele, you've got to be in that market, like you said, in California, that has the resources to reimburse you. It's just kind of difficult. It just really irks me when people go on to get PhDs and they're not becoming psychologists, right? Equipped with additional skills and training to do those testing and assessments, and so I see that a lot in my circle that I have on Facebook and on LinkedIn. But to each their own. It goes back to that question: why do you want to get a PhD? And if your goal is not to teach in academia, it's just I'm kind of curious to know. And this isn't the psychologist. This is just a PhD, which is more education, training. But how are you going to apply it in your practice? And so that's the good question that I would like to ask. I stopped because I realized, well, what I wanted to do All I need is an LPC.
Mhm.
So that was DK's response.
Yeah,
And so
that's exactly what I was speaking towards. He got the LPC, and you'll be surprised what you can do with that degree. You have a lot of people that'll get the PhD, and they're like, okay, I want to make my schedule my own, and I'm gonna just see clients, which is again like you could have stopped right there at the LPC, been comfortable without a lot of debt under your head on your head, and being able to build that practice. I mean, from the time that you and I both graduated, it's been 5 years, and
yeah.
I'm just starting back out, and you're established. So even that piece is kind of an emotional hit, because it's like the delayed gratification of like, when am I going to use these skills that I've been building up for such a long time?
Coming out of that master's program in psychology, I really appreciate the background versus a counseling or a social work. No offense to either one of those programs, or a LMFT program. I want to get back on the LMFT in California, by the way. But the psychology component allowed me to do the psychological testing, gave me that background. Not a whole lot. I had to go after me graduating from my program. I had to get that additional training. I had the wonderful opportunity to fall in the hands of the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department, the forensics department, where I really got my feet wet in doing those psychological assessments. So I really appreciate that background that we got from that master's program at Texas Southern University. However, it definitely could have been beefed up a little bit more, preparing us for what we were getting into.
Right.
Let me let me ask another question from Ornella. Have you come across sports psychologists with LPCS and LICSWs?
I have not. Most of the sports psychologists that I've come across have been doctoral level. And so it's for a few reasons, and I can answer that a little bit. You think about, sports psychology, it is a very specific niche that you would go into, but you have to know, because you're primarily going to be working cross-functionally with neurologists, teams. So you're going to have a competency for like anatomy, brain pieces, body parts, and also working with the client with what they're dealing with emotionally, and being able to transfer that language across the board.
Yeah, to
So
optimize.
that's just been in my piece here, out here in California, that a lot of the ones that I've met functioning at a high level, but being able to communicate with medical professionals and being respected, and having the competency to write up some of these reports and not have anybody have to underwrite or co-sign any of those pieces. So that's one of the pieces that just in my experience.
How do you feel about writing reports? How do you feel about that?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How do you feel about writing reports?
The report writing process is interesting. It depends on the setting, the audience you're writing towards. Some people want it short and sweet. If you're dealing with your medical, it depends. In a hospital setting, you're dealing with, everybody has respect in their different parts, and you're providing this psychological piece, which is the setting that I love to work in, because I know the most on this table. But when it comes to diagnosing, it's a collaborative effort. So I'm going to give recommendations. Social work's going to give recommendations. Neurology is going to give recommendations. Imaging is going to give recommendations. Now, what's the best diagnosis we come up with as a consensus for this one patient? Rather than God complex, I'm going to give my recommendations, and this is what it specifically is. And sometimes, because we're human, we get it wrong, right? Or we get it right.
And that's why it's so important. It's so important to emphasize practicing. If you notice, I asked you, where do you like practicing more? What do you like practicing? Because this is a practice in our profession. A medical doctor, where do you practice? What industry do they practice? What specialty do they practice in? And so, it is a practice, but we're trying to get it right every single time. And so let me ask you about Miss Lemons has a question. Are you also practicing privately outside of your work?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Now, I remember in the past you talked about teaching. So what about teaching outside of your work?
Yeah, that one. I'm at Antioch, Santa Barbara, and so I do a lot of the assessment courses, statistic courses there. I've been doing that for the past like 3 years now. As a
Statistics.
Yeah,
Statistics.
I know, right? Those, yeah. But and teaching master's level students. So a lot of the questions that we're going over are the questions that they have, like right before they're done, as far as making that jump to the side of your PhD, or should they just stop here? Yeah. So these are actually really good questions that hopefully some of you are, when you're in that fork in the road, it'll help you make that decision. As
Um,
far as plans to work more with geriatric patients, yes, that's always going to be on the table for myself. That's a population I've been um, just passionate about, and I work well with. For me right now, again, my specialty is when severe mental illness meets neurodegeneration, and that's the
mm.
piece that I'm focusing on, and have some books in play that I'm working on there.
Yeah, so when you're talking about the neurodegeneration, you're talking about like the Alzheimer's disease, the dementia.
Lewy
Um,
body, all of that, because we recognize as a field, even we deal with the DSM, but it's rare to just find a client with one diagnosis. It's always like the layered piece. And so with clients that have lived with bipolar for 30, 40 years, well, guess what? They're going to get old, and there's going to be some degeneration happening. What happens when those two components overlap? That's the piece that I want to try to just have an answer for, or to say we're still exploring, but this is what we found so far. Big limitation in the research there.
mm, mm. That's good. Man, I love to hear, man. I feel like this was extremely valuable. I'm glad that I chose to get you on the stream versus us setting up a private chat. I want you to stay on even after we end the live. But if there's any questions, if there's any more questions before we go ahead and jump off, I want to go ahead and let you all know that you can catch the replay. You can catch the replay on the LinkedIn. You can catch the replay on YouTube. And I'll be sure to email you and let you know how you can gain access to the replay. It'll give you the direct link. All you have to do is go to the Beacons app on my profile. Go to the Beacons app if you're on my YouTube. Go to the Beacons app if you're on my TikTok. Make sure that you click subscribe, or go to the link the very first link, and it is to this live stream. Do you have advice for any certifications to get? I'm assuming advice to get more competitive, to become more competitive, to go into a program. I have my master's, but wanted to ask if you advise anything like EMDR, etc.
The one big one that I've seen kind of work wonders and open up doors out here in California, DBT. Having a certification in that modality has been very rewarding. It just depends on your setting and where you're working at. So for some places, you have all these credentials, but one, are they going to allow you to work in that modality? Two, can you bill in that modality and get paid? That's the other. With DBT and having that, it is evidence based, and there has been a lot of people that's kind of been the piece where two applicants we have, and we're looking at them maybe to promote or move ahead. That would be the piece where, like, oh, they have this specialized training, they can maybe work with more clients, or they can maybe do in services and teach when they have that certification credential. But yeah,
So DBT, the DBT is the diabolic behavioral therapy.
dialectical behavioral therapy, yes.
I can never say that word. I can never say that. I can never say that word right. um, okay, so the last thing that I want to touch on was the LMFT in California. So you say, so just a heads up, social workers in Texas are the gold standard in this profession at the master's level. And we know this because insurance reimburses more so for the services from a social worker versus a LMFT or a LPC. Now, you're telling me in California, it's a little bit different. Tell me more about that, please.
Right. So that was something that I had to wrap my head around as far as like, when I looked at LMFT in Texas, it was very limiting to the population you can service. Here, it's very open. So LMFT pretty much, in California, you can do whatever you want to do. When I say that, I'm meaning that you don't necessarily just have to work with families. You can do individual therapy. You can do group therapy. There's different settings in social work that you might be able to, even apply for. The reason that I found out that's a big thing here is because CAMF, that's the California, what is it? Let's see. It's the California Board for LMFT out here. And they are one of the predominant like proponents for that degree. So a lot of the placements where, in Texas, it might just be social work, it will be open up to LMFT, LPC, and et cetera. Whereas in Texas, you might have an opening in a hospital and it's just social work. You have to have a background in social work and come from a credential degree. Here, it's always left a little bit open for the LMFT. So, a lot of clients and students out here, when I ask them, if you think that you're going to stay in California and practice, that's what you want. For a lot of them, they're like, I'm going to go to Oregon or I might live somewhere else. Now that's where they start to consider the requirements for the LPC in that state. Across the country, I think LPC is going to be the gold standard, and it appears that way. But in California, the LMFT is like widespread, and it is like it's a group. I've met LMFTs that have been put in director positions, which is rare because, as you know, in the South, it's like you have to have a doctorate or some type of like, additional maybe graduate degree or something to even ascend to those ranks. But here, that LMFT holds a lot of weight, and I've seen them work. Even to myself, I'm like, are they practicing outside of their scope? But it's it's dominant out here. I can't deny it. And I have a lot of students are like, should I get this or get that? And we have a conversation about it. Where do you want to practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in Texas, to get those hospital director positions, clinical director in a psychiatric inpatient hospital, behavioral health hospital, to get those director positions, most of the companies, the large corporations, they want a social worker in that position, at the very least. LMSW working towards the LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. So that was great. That was some really good insight that you had gave on the LMFT. I was really curious about that, but we had talked maybe a year ago and you had told me about that and about the opportunities for LMFT and how they're eating out there. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe in the future, I will cross-pollinate and go ahead and get licensed out in California, just for different reasons. So I want to open up my facilities out here, and then I want to go ahead and tap the market that's in California. So that's something that I've always aspired to do as well. We don't have any other questions. Do you have any other remarks before we close out? I wanted to keep it at about 45 minutes just because I understand attention spans. So go ahead if you have anything else that you would like to share. Where can they find you on LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn at Dr. Gerard Duncan. Still debating on launching the social media piece, but it'll be coming soon, probably within the next year. I have a few professional and personal books that I'll be writing and publishing. So that's something that, I look forward to maybe coming back on and sharing some of those with you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I want to kind of mark your progress because it's a beautiful thing to see how we were both students, then we were both masters, then I became licensed and you went on to get your PhD and now you're licensed. And it's beautiful to watch the journey. So I really enjoy catching up with you and talking to you. Just stay with me after this here, this ending, I guess, me ending the segment, and then we're going to catch up a little bit more off segment. I appreciate those who have joined me. Make sure that you subscribe to the email list. Every time that I go live, you will get an email letting you know when I'm going to be going live, what I'm going to be talking about. So if it interests you, go ahead and tap in, register for the webinar, or put it on your calendar. Thank y'all so much.
Jumping out the whip, shit cold. Watching my step ground froze. Most my day spent alone. Tim and my bro, he knows. Gotta pay dues. Walking in mud, you can check my shoes. Tryna bite this.